The Mafia Boss commands cities, but begs for the heart that fears him. Harold Mercado stands in the center of his penthouse, the city lights glowing behind him like a warning he can't ignore. His grip tightens around his phone as a low voice delivers a threat about Kim. His jaw flexes, but for the first time in years, power does nothing for him. All he can hear is her name spoken with danger. Across town, Kim Drolet stands frozen in her small apartment. Her hands tremble around her phone, her breath uneven. The message she just received keeps replaying in her mind, each word heavier than the last. Her hazel eyes search the room as if danger could already be there. 20 minutes later, Harold reaches her door. His chest rises sharply as he takes in the fear on her face. The man who controls half of Chicago's underground steps forward without thinking, pulling her into his arms. His tattoos shift across his skin as he holds her close, almost too tightly. I've ended careers with a single call. I've made grown men beg. But right now, holding you like this, I'm the one begging. Don't leave. Don't run from me. Don't stop loving me because of the danger I brought. A powerful man is forced to face the one truth he can't bend to his will, her heart. Thank you. Truly, thank you for spending these moments with me. Every time you watch, every time you listen, every time you allow these characters to touch your heart, you give life to this channel. Your support is the reason these stories continue to breathe. We're on a journey together, one built on love, heartbreak, healing, and resilience. And now, we're reaching for a new milestone, 10,000 subscribers. It's a big dream, but it's a dream we can reach together. If you've been enjoying these stories, if you've ever felt seen, moved, comforted, or inspired by them, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription isn't just a number. It's a message that these stories matter, that this little storytelling family is growing, and that we're building something beautiful here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And thank you for being part of this journey. Let's reach 10,000, side by side. Harold Mercado wakes before the sun rises, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse near the Chicago River. From up here, the city looks quiet, but he knows every block is alive with movement tied to his name. River North, Pilsen, the South Side, the warehouses near the old factories, each area answers to him. Some through respect, some through fear, some through both. To the public, he owns restaurants, security companies, nightclubs, and real estate groups. They see a successful businessman with polished shoes and a flawless reputation. What they don't see is the other world running beneath the surface, transactions that never enter a ledger, meetings that happen in back rooms, deals struck with people who never use their real names. Harold learned long ago that power is safest when it looks clean. He reviews reports at a long walnut table while 3 of his top associates stand nearby. None speak unless asked. Their eyes lower whenever he glances their way, not out of weakness but because they know the cost of his disappointment. Harold signs documents, gives instructions, shifts entire plans with a quiet sentence that carries more weight than shouting ever could. When he lifts his arm to reach for a folder, the ink on his skin moves with him. A phoenix stretches across his right arm, a reminder of the night he crawled out of a life that tried to end him at 17. The Roman numerals on his left shoulder mark the date he lost someone who mattered more than his own breath. Each design is a memory carved into his body, a promise to never forget the price paid for the life he now leads. Outside his penthouse, his driver waits with the black SUV. His day is mapped down to the minute: a visit to a River North restaurant, a meeting at a South Side warehouse, calls with people watching certain territories. He moves through Chicago like a man who owns every corner. Yet nothing about his routine feels personal anymore. Respect is constant. Obedience is constant. But connection? That part of his life has been empty for years. At the same hour across the city, Kim Drolle stands at a bus stop in Lincoln Park, coffee cup warming her hands. Her world is quieter, slower, built around choices meant to keep her safe after too much loss. She arrived in Chicago 6 months ago, carrying only 2 suitcases and the memory of her brother whose life ended in a street shooting back in Portland. She had promised herself that she would not live in pain forever. Chicago was her attempt at a new beginning. Now she works at Castellano and Associates in the Loop as a forensic accountant. Numbers don't lie to her. They don't change depending on mood or loyalty. They don't turn on her the way people sometimes do. She likes the structure, spreadsheets, patterns, reports she can trust. Her desk is always neat. Her coffee always tastes the same. Her coworkers know her as the quiet one who stays late to finish reports and rarely joins after-work outings. On Thursdays, she walks through Millennium Park before heading home. The routine started on accident but soon became something she looked forward to, a simple path where her grief feels less sharp. She sits near the water, listening to footsteps around her, reminding herself that life continues. That she can continue with it. She still thinks about her brother every day. Not just the pain of losing him, but the anger she felt toward the violence that stole him. She didn't hate cities. She didn't hate people. She hated the choices some made that destroyed lives with no thought of the damage left behind. She promised she would stay far from anything that reminded her of that world. Kim doesn't know that somewhere across the city, a man with power she can't imagine is walking through his morning unaware that her existence will soon shift everything he knows. Harold and Kim move through the same streets but live in different realities, his built on control, hers on rebuilding. His world demands strength, hers seeks peace. He wears luxury because it proves he survived. She keeps her life simple because she wants stability. 2 lives running in parallel, never touching. Not yet. Kim first sees the Mercado Group assignment in a stack of folders on Monday morning. It looks ordinary. Another mix of restaurants, nightclubs, entertainment spaces, and real estate under a single umbrella. The company is large, but Chicago has many large companies. She doesn't think twice as she opens the file, expecting another routine review. By noon, she realizes this portfolio is different. The numbers don't behave the way most corporate books do. Cash transactions appear far more often than expected, especially for businesses that claim to rely mostly on digital payments. Certain consulting fees have no clear purpose, yet they recur with exact timing every quarter. Some real estate values shift in ways that don't match market trends, too high, too low, or too conveniently balanced. Nothing is obviously illegal, but everything feels off enough that she pauses more than once. Her training makes her look for patterns, and patterns are exactly what she finds. Not loud or sloppy ones, quiet ones. Intentional ones. Someone planned these structures with care, hiding movement under layers of legal activity. She starts marking questions on sticky notes, filling an entire page with concerns she needs clarified. Still, she doesn't feel worried. Companies often have complex structures. She expects she'll meet a financial controller or senior accountant who can clear everything up. That is the plan she holds onto as she takes the L train to the West Loop later in the week. Mercado Group's headquarters is nothing like she pictured. Instead of a glass tower or modern office building, it sits inside a converted warehouse. The brick exterior looks strong, almost intimidating, but the large windows reveal a clean, renovated space inside. The moment she steps through the doors, she notices how quiet it is. Not tense, just controlled. People walk with purpose, speaking softly, moving quickly. She checks in at the front desk, receives a visitor badge, and follows a staff member to a conference room with long industrial lights hanging above a polished table. She sets her laptop down, arranges her questions, rehearses her opening lines. Everything feels normal, manageable. The door opens. Her breath catches before she can stop it. Harold Mercado steps inside, not with assistants or managers, but alone. He closes the door behind him, his presence filling the room in a way that feels impossible to ignore. His broad shoulders stretch the fabric of his dark shirt, the ink on his forearms visible where the sleeves stop. His gaze is sharp, focused, and when it lands on her, she feels heat gather low in her stomach, something she definitely didn't prepare for. She stands so quickly her chair hits the wall. "Mr. Mercado," she says, clearing her throat. "I wasn't expecting you." His voice is low, steady. "I thought it was time we met. After all, you're reviewing my entire operation." The way he says operation sends a small shiver through her. Not fear, awareness. He takes the seat across from her, but somehow it feels like he is closer than he should be. She tries to focus on her spreadsheet, but the energy coming off him is impossible to ignore. It isn't loud or dramatic. It is simply there, like a current moving between them. "Let's go through your questions," he says. She begins speaking, naming specific entries and asking for clarification. He doesn't send for an accountant or redirect her to someone else. He answers everything himself. His explanations are calm, concise, too knowledgeable for a man who should have 10 people handling these details. The more he speaks, the more she senses he has control over every layer of his empire. But something else is happening too. He's watching her. Not in a way that feels inappropriate, but in a way that feels aware. When she twists her pen while thinking, his eyes follow the small movement. When she pushes her glasses up the bridge of her nose, the corner of his mouth lifts slightly, like he notices the habit. His gaze lingers on her hands longer than necessary, as if trying to understand her through the way she moves. She finishes her list, but her heart is still beating too fast. "You're thorough," Harold says. Most people stop asking questions after the first few pages. She swallows lightly. "I don't like missing details." "I can see that." The room grows quiet again, but not uncomfortable. Something unspoken settles between them. Interest neither of them expected, attraction neither of them intended. She gathers her documents, trying to regain control of her thoughts. "I'll prepare a follow-up set of questions for next week." He stands, stepping closer than before. Not enough to touch, but enough that she feels the warmth from his body. "I'll make myself available," he says softly. "Anytime you need." The statement hangs in the space between them, layered with meaning both of them feel but neither names. The meetings should have been routine. They should have involved Harold's financial team, a few spreadsheets, and quick explanations that would allow Kim to finish her audit and move on to her next assignment. But every time she emailed with a question, the reply came from Harold himself. Not his controller. Not his legal counsel. Not anyone who normally handled accounting details. It was always him. So when Kim arrived at the West Loop headquarters for the second meeting, she wasn't surprised to see him waiting in the conference room. What surprised her was the slight warmth in his eyes when she walked in, a quiet softness not present during their first encounter. "You didn't have to meet me again," she said, setting her laptop down. "I wanted to," he replied, without hesitation. The meeting began with numbers, statements, receipts, and questions. But slowly, inevitably, the conversation shifted. When she mentioned having trouble finding a decent lunch spot near her office, he told her about a small family-owned place in Greektown that served lemon chicken soup he swore could fix anything. When she mentioned liking the walk through Millennium Park, he asked which part was her favorite. She surprised herself by answering honestly, describing how the modern buildings stood like metal giants above the open space, making her feel small in a way that didn't hurt. Harold listened closely, as if every detail mattered. But the more she learned, the more her unease grew. She could tell his empire was large, powerful, complicated. The kinds of things she saw on his ledgers matched the patterns she'd spent years resenting, patterns she associated with the world that took her brother away. By the third meeting, she couldn't ignore the truth sitting between them. She took a slow breath and spoke before she could stop herself. I think you operate in spaces between legal and illegal. Harold didn't flinch. He didn't look offended or angry. Instead, he folded his arms, the ink across his skin shifting with the movement, and met her gaze directly. I exist in gray spaces because that's where I can protect what matters to me, he said. No excuses. No apology. Just honesty. Those lines, they've kept people alive. Kim's chest tightened. She knew what he meant, but she also knew how messy those gray spaces could become. She'd lived with the aftermath before. She didn't want to walk back into that world. Not in any form. Yet whenever she looked at him, something inside her softened. Something she didn't want to name. He watched her in silence, studying the conflict in her expression. He didn't push. Didn't attempt to convince her. He simply stayed steady, as if he understood she needed space to figure out what she felt. Days later, a spring storm rolled into Chicago, heavy rain striking the windows of the conference room during another audit meeting. Thunder echoed through the building, but neither of them moved. They sat at the table with an untouched stack of documents between them. You're quiet today, Harold said gently. I'm thinking, she whispered. He leaned back slightly, the storm outside casting shifting shadows across his features. About the audit? No, she forced herself to meet his eyes. About everything. For the first time, Harold looked uncertain, just for a heartbeat. Something vulnerable flashed through his expression, something he couldn't hide. When you walked into this building, he said softly, you looked at me like I was a problem to be solved, not a threat to be feared. Do you know how rare that is? The confession stole her breath. He wasn't speaking like a man who wanted control. He was speaking like a man who wanted to be understood. Kim's fingers tightened around her pen. Her thoughts raced, her emotions tangled. She had promised herself she would never be drawn to someone connected to danger. She had built a life on that promise. Yet here she was. I can't stop thinking about you, she whispered, every word shaking. And I don't know what to do with that. The room went silent. The storm kept pounding against the glass, but inside, everything felt still. Harold didn't smile. He didn't reach for her. He simply let her words settle between them, as if they were something delicate he didn't want to break. Thank you for trusting me with that, he said quietly. Something shifted in that moment, something neither of them could push away anymore. The storm had slowed outside, but the tension inside the conference room stayed thick. Kim gathered her files, trying to steady her breaths. She didn't know what to expect next. She only knew her feelings were no longer something she could hide from herself. Harold stepped closer, slow enough that she had time to move away if she wanted to. He raised his hand, stopping just inches from her cheek. Not touching, waiting. Tell me to keep my distance, he murmured, voice low and steady. If you say it, I will. She looked at his hand, at the ink on his skin, at the strength and gentleness mixed together. Her heart beat fast, fear, want, confusion, all tangled. Instead of stepping away, she reached for him. Her fingers brushed the tattoos on his wrist. The touch was soft, almost unsure, but it was enough. Enough to say that she didn't want distance. Enough to tell him she wasn't ready to walk away. I can't tell you to stop, she whispered. Harold's breath eased out slowly, like her words had loosened something tight inside him. He didn't pull her into his arms. He didn't rush. He simply lowered his hand and let her fingers rest against his skin, as if giving her control of a moment he had wanted far more than he ever planned to show. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. The truth between them had already shifted. Their first real date happened days later, after Harold asked her quietly, "Let me take you somewhere meaningful." She agreed, unsure where he would bring her. He drove them to Little Italy, to a small Italian restaurant tucked between older shops. Inside, The lights were warm, the tables close together. It smelled of fresh bread and herbs, the kind of comforting mix that reminded people of home. "I used to sweep floors here," Harold said as they sat in a booth. "I was 15. The owner let me work evenings to keep me off the streets." She looked around, imagining him younger, fighting for a chance to survive. "This place must mean a lot to you." "It does." His voice softened. "My sister, Camila, she loved the ravioli here." Kim watched his expression shift. Pain, love, memory. "You've never talked about her before." He nodded slowly. "She died from leukemia. She was 17. I was 19. Losing her changed everything for me. It made me want to protect every kid in my neighborhood. I didn't want anyone else to lose family the way I did." His honesty reached her in a way nothing else had. She saw the man behind the power, behind the reputation, behind the gray spaces he lived in. A brother who had loved deeply and lost deeply. Her throat tightened. "My brother," she paused, trying to steady her voice. "He was shot. Wrong place, wrong moment. I came here because I couldn't breathe in the city where he died." Harold didn't interrupt. He didn't offer false comfort. He listened, and his eyes held a sympathy that felt real. "I get angry," she whispered. "Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying him by sitting here with someone who lives in a world that hurt him." He reached across the table, not touching her yet, just offering his presence. "Love isn't betrayal," he said gently. "Your brother would want you to find happiness. He wouldn't want you to be alone forever." Something inside her cracked open, not broken, just no longer locked. They talked for hours, about grief, survival, family, choices. Every word brought them closer, until the space between them felt too full of unspoken feelings. When Harold finally leaned forward, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't demanding. It was careful, like he was giving her every chance in the world to stop him. She didn't. Their first kiss was soft and slow, more emotion than heat. His hand found hers, holding it like something precious. When they pulled apart, he stayed close, his forehead resting lightly against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he said, barely above a whisper. "You terrify me because you're something I can't control or protect with power." Her voice shook as she answered. "When I'm with you, I feel alive for the first time since my brother died." He let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. "So what do we do now?" "We stay terrified together," she said with a small, trembling smile. His answering smile held both hope and fear, but also something stronger, commitment to whatever they were building. Something real. Something worth fighting for. 3 quiet months passed, stitched together with small joys and stolen moments that felt almost too delicate for the world Harold came from. Chicago, a city that had always tasted like steel and threat to him, slowly became something softer, because he was seeing it through Kim's eyes. He took her to places he'd never bothered to appreciate. Rooftop gardens tucked above old brick buildings, where vines climbed rusted railings and the skyline looked less intimidating from a distance. He brought her to late-night jazz sets in Bronzeville, the kind of places where legends once played and newer dreams still tried to grow. Kim loved those nights most, her head resting against his shoulder, her fingers brushing his wrist as music wrapped around them. She would close her eyes and sway, and Harold would watch her more than the stage, memorizing every small expression like it was a secret only he was allowed to know. Some mornings, before the sun stretched over the lake, he would drive her to Lincoln Park Zoo. It opened early for staff and joggers, but Harold always had ways of slipping in quietly. They'd walk with coffee cups warming their hands, laughing at sleepy lions sprawled across rocks or penguins waddling with the kind of confidence Harold envied. Kim said those early hours felt like the world was gentle enough to trust, and Harold clung to that feeling in a way he'd never admit aloud. But Kim gave him something in return, something he'd never known he needed.
Normalcy.
Soft, uncomplicated normalcy.
Sunday mornings became sacred. She'd sit cross-legged on her couch with the Tribune spread out between them.
Harold, who had never cared about crossword puzzles or feature stories, found himself actually invested because she was invested. Sometimes she would read headlines aloud, her voice bright and curious, and he would listen like each word was something precious. Sometimes they cooked together in her tiny apartment kitchen, maneuvering around each other while she scolded him for chopping vegetables like he was preparing weapons instead of dinner. He admired the way she moved, so careful, yet so warm. And even when he teased her for using too much garlic, he secretly loved everything she made. On stormy nights, when rain swept over Lake Michigan in roaring sheets, they'd sit by her window. She loved watching storms. He loved watching her watching them. She would curl against him, the glow from streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement, and whisper that the sound of rain made her feel safe. Harold, who had never associated storms with anything except danger, slowly learned to breathe easier too, because her presence softened the thunder. Their intimacy grew in quiet, unforced ways. The world saw Harold as a man built of sharp edges and control, someone whose touch usually carried consequences. But with Kim, he learned gentleness almost instinctively. He touched her like she was something he wanted to protect rather than claim. He kissed her slowly, like each moment deserved to last longer than it did. When they lay together, there was no rush, no demand, only a tenderness that surprised him every time. One night, as her cheek rested against his chest, she whispered into the darkness, "I've never felt cherished before, like I'm something precious." Harold tightened his arm around her. "You are precious. You're the best part of my day. Every day." Kim didn't answer at first. She simply breathed against him, holding his hand like his words were something to steady herself with. Harold didn't realize he was trembling slightly until she kissed the center of his palm. Between whispered confessions and long-held insecurities, something deeper formed between them, more than attraction, more than desire. Something that felt like it had roots. Sometimes she talked about her childhood, about growing up quiet and overlooked, about pushing herself through college while working double shifts because no one was going to do the hard work for her. She admitted she rarely let people close, that she didn't know how to trust easily. Harold confessed things he'd never voiced. The pressure of leading men who feared him but depended on him. The burden of controlling territory that others constantly tried to take. The weight of making decisions that lingered on his conscience even when he tried not to think about them. Kim didn't flinch. She held his face in her hands and kissed him softly, without judgment. Her acceptance hollowed something inside him and filled it with warmth he didn't know he could feel. He found himself imagining things he had never dared imagine. Simple things. Beautiful things. Future things. One night, while they lay beneath the dim light of her bedside lamp, he traced slow circles on her back and said quietly, "I think about growing old with you." She lifted her head, startled. "A little girl with your eyes," he continued, voice rough with sincerity, "Sunday mornings and family dinners. A home that doesn't need guards at the door. A life where I don't have to constantly look over my shoulder." Kim's throat tightened. She pressed her forehead against his, unable to speak. Harold wasn't a man who dreamed. He wasn't a man who allowed himself fantasies that could be ripped away. But with her, those dreams came without warning, soft, uninvited, and persistent. The contrast between his world and their private sanctuary became more vivid with each passing week. He spent his days in meetings that carried unspoken threats, discussing shipments, alliances, and territory tensions. Men waited for his decisions like their lives depended on them, because often they did. But the moment he walked into Kim's apartment, everything inside him shifted. Walls dropped. Tension melted. The man who held power through fear transformed into someone capable of gentleness, quiet laughter, and warm embraces. She brought out parts of him he didn't know existed.
He didn't understand how she made it look so effortless. How someone who had been through her own shadows could bring so much light into his life.
When he looked at her, he felt something rare, hope. A future that wasn't stained with danger.
He wanted that. He wanted her.
But neither of them knew that love, no matter how carefully hidden, lived on borrowed time in a world like his. The shift began quietly, small ripples that neither Harold nor Kim immediately recognized for what they were. But they grew, spreading through the calm they had built, gathering weight day by day.
It started at Kim's office.
Her supervisor, Ms. Lang, asked her to step into her glass-paneled office one Tuesday morning. Kim clutched her notepad as she entered, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling crawling up her spine. Ms. Lang folded her hands. "Kim, you've been spending a significant amount of time on the Mercado account. More than anyone else on the team." "I'm just trying to stay on top of it," Kim said, aiming for professionalism, not panic. "That's exactly what concerns me. Your notes, your analysis, your involvement, it's unusually thorough." Ms. Lang tilted her head. "Are you sure you're able to maintain objectivity? We need to be careful when dealing with high-profile clients. Lines can blur." Kim felt her stomach drop. She nodded, forcing a calm expression, but her pulse raced. "I understand. I'll make adjustments." But when she walked back to her desk, the truth hit her hard. Her relationship with Harold, private, hidden, beautiful, now threatened her career. If anyone discovered how deeply involved they were, her credibility could collapse. Everything she had worked for could be dismissed as compromised. The weight of that realization followed her for days. Meanwhile, Harold moved through a different storm. The Port of Chicago, his largest distribution channel, was under pressure. Someone wanted his territory. Someone bold enough to steal, bold enough to challenge him in ways he hadn't faced in years. Meetings stretched late into the night. Men left his office with grim expressions. Phone calls came in at all hours, voices tense and urgent. And Kim felt every shift. Their once peaceful dinners turned into half-finished meals interrupted by vibrating phones. Their conversations stopped mid-sentence when he stepped away to answer in low, clipped tones. Dates were cut short with vague apologies he didn't have time to explain. He still held her at night, still looked at her with tenderness that felt like a promise, but the distance creeping between them terrified her. It wasn't emotional abandonment. It was practical, circumstantial, but no less painful. She didn't blame him. She just felt lust. One Thursday night, he was supposed to come over after a long day. Kim waited, watching the minutes slide into hours. Rain tapped against her window, soft at first, then heavier, as if the sky mirrored her worry. When Harold finally arrived past midnight, he looked exhausted, pale with stress. His shirt was undone at the collar, his shoulders tight. He tried to smile, but it faltered before reaching his eyes. Kim stepped toward him, her voice barely steady. "Let me in. Let me help." Harold exhaled slowly, as if her words pressed on an old wound. "Kim, tonight, 2 warehouses were hit. Merchandise gone. 3 of my men hurt. It's not a simple problem. It's someone trying to make a statement." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, not from lack of love, but from fear. He rubbed the back of his neck, frustration etched in every line of his body. "If they know about you," he said softly, painfully, "you become the ultimate target. You're my weakness, and in my world, weaknesses get exploited." Kim felt tears swell. "So we can't be together? Loving each other is too dangerous." He flinched, the question cutting deeper than she intended. "I don't know how to protect you and keep you in my life," he admitted, voice cracking in a way she had never heard from him. "I feel like every choice puts you at risk. Every second you're near me, you're exposed." Kim stepped closer, touching his cheek gently. His eyes closed,
as if her touch eased something tight inside him. "I don't want to be shut out," she whispered.
"I know your world is dangerous.
I know there are things you can't always say. But don't make this choice alone.
We're in this together." Her voice trembled, but her resolve didn't.
She wasn't naive. She understood the gravity of his world. She understood the shadows it carried.
But she also understood love, and she refused to let fear dictate the rest of their story. Harold opened his eyes, and the torment in them made her breath catch. He leaned his forehead against hers, holding her hands as if grounding himself. "You don't know how much I want to believe that," he murmured. "But every threat I face, you'd face too.
And I couldn't live with that."
Kim brushed a tear off her cheek and whispered, "Then teach me how to stand with you. Don't push me away."
He let out a shaky breath, somewhere between a sigh and a plea.
He kissed her, slow, deep, full of longing and heartbreak tangled together. It was the kind of kiss that said, "I need you and I'm terrified of losing you in equal measure." When he pulled back, their foreheads remained pressed together. "I don't deserve you," Harold said quietly.
Kim shook her head. "This isn't about deserving.
It's about choosing." He exhaled, trembling slightly, and she felt the moment he stopped trying to hold himself at a distance. The moment he let her in. The moment he accepted that she refused to stand outside the walls he'd built around his life. She wrapped her arms around him, and he sank into her embrace like a man finally admitting he needed help carrying the weight. Their world was shifting, changing, tightening around them. The pressure increased from all sides, her career, his territory, their fragile peace. But for the first time in weeks, they held each other without barriers, without hesitation. Love had never felt so dangerous. But it had also never felt so necessary. The night it happened was warm, the kind of August night where the city hummed with late summer energy. Kim stayed at the office long after most employees had gone home, focused on closing out a report she wanted finished before morning. The floor was quiet, the only sound the soft clicking of her keyboard. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway, thinking it might be Ms. Lang or a client. The voice that greeted her was unfamiliar, smooth, and cold in a way that made her instinctively straighten in her chair. "You have something Harold wants," the caller said. "Yourself."
Kim's breath snagged in her chest. "Who is this?"
"I want territory he controls," the voice continued, ignoring her question. "We can make an exchange. You leave Chicago tonight, quietly, and I get what I need. If you stay, everyone caught between us pays the price." Her hands shook so violently she had to grip the edge of her desk to steady herself. The office suddenly felt too empty, too exposed. "I don't understand," she whispered, though she did. Every word felt like a trap tightening around her heart. "You're smart. You understand perfectly."
A pause.
"Leave tonight, or face consequences you can't outrun."
The call ended. The silence afterward felt deafening.
Kim stared at her phone, numb for several seconds before her thoughts snapped into frantic motion. She called Harold instantly, her fingers trembling so badly she almost dropped the phone.
It rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. No answer. She called again. Still nothing.
She tried again, panic rising in her throat, her breaths turning shallow. By the 6th attempt, her hands were ice cold and her heartbeat felt scattered. When his voicemail came on again, she finally forced out the words through shaking breaths. Someone called. Made threats. "I need you." She ended the call and clasped her hands over her mouth, fighting tears. She grabbed her bag, rushed to the elevator, and hurried home in a haze of fear. Her legs nearly gave out as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. She had barely closed the door behind her when she heard footsteps pounding up the hallway. A sharp knock. "Kim." "Open the door." "Harold." She flung it open.
He entered with 2 security men close behind. His chest rose and fell sharply, not from exertion but fury, barely restrained. He cupped her face with both hands, searching her eyes as if confirming she was still alive. "Where were you?" she whispered, her breath unsteady. "In a meeting. I left the second I heard your message." He turned to his men. "Sweep everything. Phones, walls, vents. No limits." They moved quickly through her apartment, checking every corner with practiced efficiency. Harold guided her to the sofa, keeping one hand on her back as though afraid she might vanish. His voice was low, controlled only by force of will. "What did they say?" Kim repeated the words, her voice cracking halfway through. Harold's jaw clenched, the muscles twitching under his skin. The moment the security team returned with a brief report, "No devices found," Harold made his decision. "Pack a bag," he said, his tone absolute. "You're coming with me where I can protect you." Kim hesitated. "Maybe I should leave the city." "That's what they want. It could keep you safe. Keep your people safe." Harold turned fully toward her, his eyes dark with a kind of calm that was more dangerous than rage. "You're not disappearing from my life because someone made threats. I will not let fear drag you away from me." "Harold." No, his voice cracked, not in anger, but in something close to pain. "I've been keeping distance, trying to shield you. Trying to limit how close you are to my world. That was a mistake. The safest place for you is at my side." Kim stared at him, stunned by the intensity of his conviction. She had seen him angry before, and protective, and tender. But this was different. This was a man pushed past every boundary he had ever respected. "But your business," she whispered. "Your territory. This could cost you everything." He stepped close, taking her hands in his. "Means nothing without you." Her breath hitched. She felt the truth in those words, raw, unfiltered, terrifying in its depth. For months he had tried to hold back, to control every part of their connection. Now he was done holding back. The threat had stripped away any remaining distance. He kissed her forehead, a touch full of devotion and fear intertwined. "Pack your things," he said softly. "You're coming home with me." Kim moved around her apartment in a daze, grabbing clothes, essentials, anything she could think of. Harold stayed close, directing his men through low, focused instructions. His eyes never stayed away from her for long. When they stepped out into the hallway, Harold's arm wrapped around her protectively. 2 cars waited outside, his, and one behind it filled with men ready to follow on command. Inside the car, Kim sat close to him, her fingers entwined with his. The city lights blurred past, but she barely saw them. Harold pressed a kiss to her temple. "I promise you," he said quietly, "this ends now. Threatening you crossed a line. There will be consequences." This time, his tone held no rage, only certainty. A shift had taken place inside him. He was no longer reacting to attacks. He was preparing to end the source. Kim rested her head against his shoulder, heart still racing. She feared the danger, yes, but she also felt a fierce clarity. Harold wasn't choosing his empire. He was choosing her. And that changed everything. The 72 hours that followed were a whirlwind unlike anything Kim had ever witnessed. Harold's penthouse, usually a place of rare calm, became a command center. Phones rang without pause. Men moved quickly through the rooms, exchanging coded instructions and updates. Charts, documents, and laptops crowded the massive dining table, yet Harold navigated it all with the precision of a seasoned strategist. Kim watched him from the couch, her hands clasped in her lap, marveling at the duality of the man before her. He was commanding and decisive, every word cutting through the chaos with authority. At the same time, he was tender, constantly glancing at her, checking if she was okay, if she needed water,
if she wanted to sit closer. He placed a soft kiss on her forehead during one particularly tense phone negotiation, whispering, "Stay here. You're safe," as if that single act could shield her from all the danger outside. She had thought she knew Harold, but now she saw the full spectrum. He could move a dozen people across the city with a single directive, anticipate threats before they arrived, and respond without hesitation. And yet, in the midst of all that power, he paused for her. Every message he typed, every phone call he made, he kept one eye on her. By the second day, his plan became clear. He wasn't going to retaliate with violence. Not this time. Instead, he leveraged his connections, media contacts, former allies in law enforcement, and legal experts to reveal the rivals' operations. Financial crimes, corrupt political alliances, human trafficking. He built a web of undeniable evidence and let the authorities do the rest. Kim leaned against him when the news broke. Federal authorities were involved. The rival was arrested. The empire they had tried to claim collapsed under the weight of exposure. Harold's restraint, his refusal to use his own violent means, had worked. The city had never seen him operate this way, and Kim felt the full force of his brilliance, the way he could protect her without bloodshed. "You didn't kill anyone," she whispered, the disbelief and relief in her voice raw. Harold slumped into the couch beside her, exhaustion etched into every line of his body. "Not this time," he admitted quietly. "You make me want to be better. To find solutions without leaving destruction behind." Kim turned toward him, brushing a damp strand of hair from his forehead. "I'm not asking you to change who you are," she said softly. "I'm asking you to let me love who you are. All of it." He shook his head, closing his eyes. "I don't deserve you. Not after everything I've done, everything I am." Her hand found his, fingers entwining with his own. She smiled, gentle but unwavering. "Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." He opened his eyes slowly, staring at her with a mix of awe and disbelief. In that moment, the penthouse, the city, even the chaos outside, all of it faded. There was only her, only the truth between them. For the first time, Harold admitted to himself what Kim already knew: love didn't require perfection. It didn't demand a flawless past, a spotless record, or a life free of danger. Love required honesty, commitment, growth, and the willingness to face life together, even when the world threatened to tear them apart. They spent the night together on the couch, arms wrapped around each other, finding solace in the quiet after the storm. He rested his head on hers, tracing slow patterns along her back. She felt the tension leave him in waves, felt the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to witness. "You kept me safe," Kim murmured, her lips brushing his temple. "No," he said, voice low. "I kept myself safe, by keeping you close. That's what matters most." She lifted her head to meet his gaze, their eyes locking in the dim glow of the city lights streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "We'll figure everything else out. Together." He smiled faintly, a rare, quiet expression, and leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. It wasn't fiery or demanding, it was gentle, reverent, full of gratitude and relief. It carried the weight of promises unspoken but understood. Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm. Chicago's streets hummed with life, unaware of the quiet resolution taking place above. But within the walls of Harold's penthouse, something stronger had been forged. Trust, vulnerability, a commitment to face danger together. Harold rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," he admitted, "or the day after that. But I know this, I won't face it without you." Kim smiled against him. "Nor will I." They lingered like that, two hearts steadying each other, two people who had seen the world's sharpest edges and chosen to hold on anyway. Outside threats could wait. Territory disputes, rivalries, and city power struggles could wait. Tonight, it was only them, and it was enough. For Harold, it was a revelation. Love didn't weaken him. It didn't make him vulnerable in the ways he had feared. Love had given him clarity, a reason to act, to fight smarter, and to protect without losing himself. For Kim, it was confirmation that the man she had fallen for, the man who could command a city, was capable of tenderness, honesty, and dedication in ways that mattered even more than power. And as dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the skyline in pale gold, Harold held her close. Kim rested against his chest, eyes closed, and let herself finally believe that love, even in the most dangerous spaces, could survive, and even thrive, when both hearts were willing to fight for it. The months following the threat passed in a rhythm that was both familiar and new. Chicago's streets, the skyline, the river, all remained the same. But for Kim and Harold, the city had taken on a new dimension. Each day became a careful balancing act, honoring who they were, while building a life together that acknowledged the realities of their worlds. Kim completed the Moquedo audit with precision, aware that her relationship with Harold had already tested her professionalism. When she transferred to a different division, she accepted the consequences: fewer high-profile projects, less opportunity for rapid promotion. It was a cost she had chosen knowingly, a gesture of commitment to both the career she valued and the love she had found. Harold, in parallel, began reshaping his own world. He delegated more, ensuring trusted lieutenants could manage operations without constant oversight. He redirected investments toward legitimate ventures, restaurants, boutique hotels, and entertainment venues that could thrive without hidden transactions. He understood that walking away from gray areas overnight would leave gaps for rivals and enemies, but he also recognized the need to leave a future in which Kim could live free of risk. Together, they found rhythm in compromise. Kim accompanied Harold to elegant fundraisers at the Drake Hotel, business dinners where influential figures studied him with wary respect, unaware of the man she truly knew. Harold attended her professional events, accounting association meetings, casual coffee sessions with young colleagues, even study groups at the library. The city became theirs in a shared sense. On weekends, they walked along the Chicago River, exploring architectural marvels and hidden staircases leading to quiet parks. Harold showed her neighborhood community centers where he had quietly supported youth programs, job training, and shelters. Kim observed the impact of his less publicized work, realizing that his reputation for control and power was only one facet of a man who could also give quietly, intentionally. They grew in tandem. Harold learned legitimate financial strategies from Kim's careful guidance, understanding nuances in tax structures, investments, and accounting practices he had never prioritized before. Kim learned the intricacies of his protective operations, gaining perspective on the calculated risks he had once taken without hesitation. Both adjusted, adapted, and respected the other's knowledge and experience. Small, intimate moments became the foundation for a deeper bond. Harold remembered exactly how she liked her coffee, how she preferred her mornings slow and her evenings calm. Kim began noticing the subtle signs of his mood, the slight tightening of his jaw, the restless pacing of his fingers, the way his eyes narrowed when assessing something dangerous in his world. They chose vulnerability over instinctive self-protection, leaning into each other's truths rather than hiding from them. Harold's gentleness became a constant surprise for Kim. He treated her as something precious, not fragile, observing her with reverence even during the busiest days. She, in turn, allowed herself to accept his care, the protective measures he took that extended far beyond the gestures of a boyfriend. They planned weekends at the zoo, rooftop dinners, and early morning strolls along quiet streets, building a shared life that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. Evenings often ended on their rooftop, the city lights sprawling beneath them. They talked about dreams, fears, and the life they hoped to build together. Harold admitted he had once thought control was the ultimate measure of security, but he had learned that love required surrender, not weakness, but trust. Kim shared her hopes for a career that mattered and a home that felt safe, her words both grounding and inspiring him. Every action, every shared experience, reinforced their understanding that compromise was not a loss but a bridge. The bridge between her world of careful logic and his world of calculated risk. Between her search for stability and his constant negotiation with danger. Between her desire for clarity and his need for control. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings, Harold poured 2 glasses of wine and led Kim to the balcony. The skyline glittered under a soft sunset, the river reflecting the fading light. He handed her a glass, studying her face with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "You've changed how I see everything," he said quietly. "I thought power meant having everything under my control. Now I know it's about protecting the people who matter and letting them see who I really am." Kim reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "And you've changed how I see myself," she replied. "You've shown me that I can embrace love, even when it's messy or dangerous, and still keep who I am." They stood together, drinking in the city and the quiet that belonged only to them. Their differences no longer felt like obstacles but rather the pillars of a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding. It was in these months of shared discovery that they began truly building an empire of two. Not through power or fear, but through presence, patience, and devotion. Each compromise, each careful negotiation between their worlds, strengthened their bond, teaching them that love could thrive even in spaces that were once divided. For Harold, the realization was humbling. He had once believed he could command every city block, control every ally and rival, and enforce loyalty through fear. But Kim had shown him a different kind of influence, the power of honesty, vulnerability, and steady love. For Kim, the growth was liberating. She had survived trauma and loss, and now she witnessed a man capable of both immense strength and unwavering tenderness. In sharing life with him, she learned that the measure of love was not safety alone, but trust in shared strength and mutual respect. Together, they carved out time for themselves amidst their responsibilities. Early mornings with coffee, late nights studying legal documents, weekends volunteering in neighborhoods Harold had helped raise up, each day strengthened the bridge between their worlds. By the end of the year, Chicago had become more than a city to them. It was a shared canvas, a playground for trust, exploration, and love. Their empire of two had begun, one built not on territory or fear, but on connection, compromise, and the quiet assurance that they would face the world together, no matter the risks. It had been almost a year since Kim moved to Chicago, and the thought of her parents visiting filled her with both excitement and anxiety. She had carefully prepared for this moment, knowing it could define how her family saw Harold, and how her relationship would be accepted. She rehearsed what she would say on the phone, describing him as simply a businessman, avoiding any detail that might trigger her parents' memories of her brother's violent death. Union Station was bustling when she arrived to meet them, their train delayed slightly, adding to her growing nervousness. She spotted her mother first, graceful but tense, scanning the crowd for her daughter. Mr. Drolet appeared beside her, shoulders squared, eyes alert and calculating. Kim's heart raced. This was the moment her two worlds would converge. Harold arrived just behind her. He had chosen casual attire, a crisp dark shirt, jeans, and leather boots, tattoos visible on his neck and wrists, unhidden, yet he carried himself with quiet confidence. Kim noticed how each movement was deliberate, calm, and respectful. She braced herself as he stepped forward. "Mrs. Drolet, Mr. Drolet," Harold said, voice steady. "It's an honor to meet you." His gaze was firm but warm, meeting theirs without hesitation. "I know what your family has suffered. Kim's safety and well-being are my priority above everything else." Her mother's eyes widened, caught between surprise and the emotion of hearing such honesty. Her father's jaw tightened, evaluating the man who had become so important to his daughter. Harold held their gaze, offering neither defensiveness nor excuses, only sincerity. The weekend had been carefully planned to allow space for understanding, conversation, and connection. Their first stop was lunch at the Walnut Room in Mace's, a place both elegant and relaxed. They spoke of Portland, of Kim's childhood, of memories her parents held close. Harold shared stories of his own past, including the death of his sister, Camila, and how that grief had shaped his devotion to family and community. His openness allowed the Drolets to see that behind the formidable reputation, there was a man capable of love and loyalty that ran deep. Over shared meals and long walks through the city, common ground emerged. Both families had experienced loss and heartbreak, each finding resilience in protecting those they loved. Conversations that could have been awkward flowed naturally, guided by Harold's willingness to be honest and Kim's careful introduction of him. Sunday morning brought a private tour of the Art Institute of Chicago. They moved slowly through the galleries, away from the public crowd, the quiet hum of the museum creating space for reflection. At one point, Harold turned to Mrs. Drolet, his tone direct but gentle. "I exist in complicated spaces," he said, "places that may not always be clear or easy to understand. But my love for Kim is straightforward. Every decision I make, every action I take, includes her at the center. I can't promise my world is simple, but I can promise that she is my priority in everything." Kim's mother studied him for a long moment, noticing how his eyes softened when they met Kim's. She saw the care in his gestures, the way he kept Kim close, the subtle attentiveness, the honesty in his words. "Kim has changed since meeting you," Mrs. Drolet said quietly, a hint of surprise and approval in her voice. "I can see it. She's calmer, more confident. She smiles differently, and it's because of how you look at her." Harold inclined his head respectfully. "Thank you. I know that trust is earned, and I intend to earn it every day. I will protect her, respect her, and cherish her, always." Mr. Drolet remained more reserved, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered the man before him. "You understand the responsibility," he said firmly. "It's not just about love. It's about safety, integrity, and keeping the people she cares about unharmed." Harold nodded, meeting his gaze evenly. "I understand. And I will not ask for forgiveness, only your acknowledgement that I will do everything in my power to honor that responsibility." By the end of the weekend, something remarkable had happened. The Drolets had seen not the powerful, untouchable man of Chicago rumors, but Harold, the man who could grieve, who could protect, who could love openly and completely. They had observed how he treated Kim with care, how he allowed her space to be herself, and how he balanced his world with their daughter's safety in mind. The acceptance was quiet but powerful. Mrs. Drolet offered a nod of approval, recognizing the genuine love Harold held for her daughter. Mr. Drolet remained cautious but allowed a subtle smile, signaling respect for Harold's honesty and commitment. Kim felt the weight lift from her chest. Her parents' approval, their acknowledgement that Harold could coexist with the role he held in the city and still be the man she needed, provided the foundation for the permanence she had secretly hoped for. Walking back to the train station on Sunday afternoon, Kim's hand found Harold's. He squeezed gently, his presence a steady anchor after the emotional intensity of the weekend. "They are good with us," Kim said softly. "I think they see what I've been trying to explain all along." Harold smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "I never needed them to like me. I needed them to know I love you and that I would always put your safety and happiness first." Kim rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the connection between them deepen. In that moment, the bridge between her world and his had strengthened. It wasn't only about compromise or understanding. It was about trust, acceptance, and the quiet acknowledgement that two very different lives could come together without losing themselves. They had faced scrutiny, judgment, and the challenge of combining two worlds with history, pain, and expectations. Yet through honesty, warmth, and love, they had built the foundation for permanent commitment. Family acceptance wasn't just a milestone. It was a promise that they could move forward, fully aware of each other's realities, ready to face whatever came next together. And as they boarded the train to return to Chicago, hands intertwined, hearts steady, both knew that the next chapter would require courage, patience, and shared strength, but it would be theirs, written together, with love at its center. The morning began with the quiet hum of routine, but by mid-morning, the rhythm of their life was shattered. FBI agents arrived at Harold's penthouse with a warrant, not for arrest, but for questioning regarding business transactions. Harold met them calmly, the kind of calm that had always unnerved even the most seasoned operatives in his city. His attorney was already on site, reviewing papers, ensuring every detail was in order. Inside, Harold moved with precision. He answered questions, produced requested documents, and navigated the scrutiny with measured patience. His layers of legitimate operations served their purpose, evidence of careful structuring, showing that his empire was no longer solely built on shadowed dealings. Meanwhile, Kim was alone in their shared apartment, her mind spinning with imagined scenarios. She paced the floors for 8 hours, imagining indictments, imprisonment, the legal system tearing them apart. Every phone call she couldn't answer felt like a signal that something had gone wrong. Every passing minute without news was a countdown toward disaster. At midnight, Harold returned, exhausted but free. His suit was rumpled, tie loosened, eyes heavy from hours of negotiation and careful responses. Yet there was relief in his expression, a quiet acknowledgement that, despite suspicions, there was no evidence sufficient for charges. The businesses were structured through legitimate layers, the hard work of the last months paying off. "I don't get to relax," Harold said, voice low but steady. "They'll keep watching. Federal attention doesn't disappear just because nothing actionable comes up today." Kim ran to him, holding him close. "Then leave it all behind. Start fresh somewhere new. We can disappear together." He shook his head, brushing hair from his forehead. "Leaving now would invite challenges. Anyone watching would see it as weakness. I can't just walk away. Not yet. But I agree that change is necessary." Over the following months, Harold created a careful transition plan. Gray area operations would be sold, assets redirected, and investments focused entirely on legitimate businesses. The process would take 2 years. It was slow, deliberate, designed to protect the city, himself, and, most importantly, Kim. One evening, during a particularly tense planning session, Harold offered something unexpected. "You could step away from this life," he said, eyes locked on hers. "I could let you go. It's the safest choice for you." Kim's eyes flared with anger and disbelief. "After everything, you think I'd abandon you at the first sign of real trouble? Do you even know me?" Harold's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of responsibility pressing down. "I know you better than anyone. And I know what danger looks like. His words faltered, vulnerable in a way she rarely saw. "I chose you," Kim interrupted, stepping closer. "Not the easy version, but the real you, with all the complications. The power, the danger, the love. I chose all of it." The tension dissolved into quiet understanding. That June evening, they stood together on the building's transformed rooftop. Thousands of tiny lights twinkled above the city, forming a canopy that mirrored the stars. Chicago stretched out beneath them, a city they had conquered in love and compromise. Harold took her hands in his, holding them against his chest. "I'm not ready to propose yet," he admitted softly. "I want to make sure the investigation concludes, that we're not leaving anything unfinished. But I need to make a promise. From his pocket, he drew a handwritten letter and a set of legal documents. The letter expressed his feelings, love, admiration, and devotion, while the documents transferred significant assets to her name. Every property, every account, every stake that could affect her safety or well-being was placed under her control. It wasn't about money, he insisted. It was about ensuring she would always be protected, no matter what happened to him. Kim looked at the papers, a flicker of disbelief crossing her features. "You're serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything," he said, eyes steady, holding hers. "It's not a gift. It's a promise. You don't have to worry about me, or the world I've built, or anything else. You are safe. Always." Tears filled her eyes as she shook her head. "It's not the money that matters. It's you. Always has been." Weeks earlier, she had written her own letter, tucked away in her journal, a letter she now revealed to him. The final line read, "When you're ready to ask, my answer is already yes." They held each other tightly, relief and emotion surging through both. On that rooftop, above the city that had tested and shaped them, they broke down completely. Two people who had survived loss, danger, and uncertainty, finding safety and love in each other. They made a promise then, whispered and fierce, to be terrified together, to embrace love despite its risks, to face every challenge as a united front. In that moment, the empire they had built wasn't measured in property or power. It was measured in trust, commitment, and unwavering devotion. The lights of the city reflected in Kim's eyes as she whispered, "I trust you. I choose you, completely." Harold pressed his forehead to hers. "And I choose you. Every day, without hesitation." For hours, they stayed on that rooftop, sharing quiet conversation, laughter, and tears. The transition plan for his empire continued in the background, but in those moments, the world beyond the rooftop ceased to exist. There was only them, their love, and the understanding that the strongest empires were not built on dominance or fear, but on honesty, care, and shared courage. By the time the city slept below, Harold and Kim had solidified a new foundation for life together. They had confronted danger, navigated uncertainty, and emerged with their hearts intact. They were no longer two separate lives intersecting. They were partners, equals, and allies in every sense. Their empire of two had grown stronger, fortified not by control, but by trust, love, and unwavering commitment to one another. 2 years had passed since the rooftop promises, and the autumn morning was crisp at the Chicago Botanic Garden in Glencoe. The leaves, turning shades of amber and rust, framed a scene of quiet intimacy. Kim and Harold stood surrounded by a small gathering. Her parents, his remaining family, and trusted friends who had watched their journey, understanding the depth of what was being witnessed. Harold wore a tailored suit, his tattoos visible and no longer concealed, a testament to the man he had become, open, honest, and committed. Kim chose a simple sky-blue dress, elegance in its understatement, reflecting the serenity and strength she had cultivated over the years. The federal investigation that had once threatened their stability had concluded 6 months prior, no charges filed, and Harold's transition to legitimacy was nearly complete. Lake Michigan gleamed in the distance as they faced one another beneath the autumn trees. The wind carried the faint scent of fallen leaves, mingling with the soft murmur of the small group. There was no grand fanfare, only the gravity of two lives converging with purpose and love. When it was Harold's turn to speak, he took Kim's hands in his. "You challenged everything I thought I knew about strength," he began, voice steady. "You taught me that commanding cities means nothing without winning your heart. Every decision, every risk, every moment I've lived, none of it mattered until I had you by my side." Kim's voice trembled slightly, filled with emotion and courage. You showed me that healing doesn't mean forgetting pain, she said. You gave me the courage to feel again, to risk again, to trust that love can exist even after loss. You made me brave in ways I never thought I could be. When they exchanged vows, there were no interruptions, no distractions. Only the words, the commitment, the acknowledgement of all they had overcome. Their first kiss as husband and wife was tender and private, despite the small audience around them. The applause came, but Harold and Kim remained wrapped in the shared victory over fear, over doubt, over the impossible odds that had once threatened their bond. The reception took place in a nearby conservatory filled with exotic plants. Warm light bathed the room as they shared their first dance. Harold held Kim close, whispering against her ear, "Thank you for being brave enough to love me, for staying when leaving would have been easier." Kim smiled, pressing her hand to his chest. "We built it together. The empire we created, it's not territory or power. It's this. Us." Harold's lips curved into a rare, unguarded smile. "The most valuable territory I'll ever control," he admitted softly, "and the only one where I'm happy to surrender completely." They moved together with ease, dancing to music that felt like it had been composed just for them. The city stretched beyond the gardens, lights shimmering across streets and rooftops, Chicago standing as witness to the love that had grown amidst its challenges. The urban skyline, once a backdrop for tension and danger, now served as a reminder of how far they had come. The triumph wasn't measured in wealth, power, or influence. It was in the creation of something extraordinary from circumstances that had once seemed impossible. They had navigated threats, danger, and uncertainty, yet emerged not only intact but strengthened. The Empire of Two was founded not on control, but on shared trust, resilience, and unwavering devotion. As they swayed together, Harold's thoughts returned to the first night he held her in his arms, when he had begged for her heart. Now, in giving it freely, Kim had conquered him completely, not with force, but with the revolutionary power of love that sees, accepts, and transforms. Their connection had become a fortress of honesty and courage. Kim rested her head against Harold's shoulder, listening to his steady heartbeat. She reflected on everything they had endured, the threats, the investigations, the uncertainties, and understood the lesson they had written together. True empire isn't built on control or fear. It's built on the vulnerability and strength of genuine connection, on the willingness to trust, to commit, and to love despite risk. The music slowed, and for a moment, they stood silently in the conservatory, surrounded by friends but focused entirely on each other. No words were necessary. Every glance, every touch, every breath spoke volumes of the journey they had shared. Harold whispered, barely audible, "I could have all the power in the world, every city and street under my command, and it wouldn't compare to this, the life we've built together." Kim lifted her eyes to meet his. "And I wouldn't trade a single moment for safety if it meant losing us. We chose each other, fully, completely. That's our empire." Together, they looked out at Chicago from the garden, the skyline a reminder of the paths they had walked, the challenges they had faced, and the love that had guided them through. They had tested the limits of trust, faced the edges of danger, and created a life that reflected their courage and commitment. The dance resumed, slow and intimate, while the city's lights stretched into the night. It was not territory that they controlled, nor influence that defined their power. Their empire was built on the strength of their hearts, the honesty of their love, and the courage to be fully themselves together. Harold commands cities but begs for her heart, and in giving it freely, Kim conquered him completely with the revolutionary power of love that sees, accepts, and transforms. Their empire of two was no longer a dream or promise. It was reality, tested and proven, a testament to the profound power of commitment, trust, and shared vulnerability. "Thank you, truly, Thank you for spending these moments with me. Every time you watch, every time you listen, every time you allow these characters to touch your heart, you give life to this channel. Your support is the reason these stories continue to breathe. We're on a journey together, one built on love, heartbreak, healing, and resilience. And now, we're reaching for a new milestone, 10,000 subscribers. It's a big dream, but it's a dream we can reach together. If you've been enjoying these stories, if you've ever felt seen, moved, comforted, or inspired by them, please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Your subscription isn't just a number. It's a message that these stories matter, that this little storytelling family is growing, and that we're building something beautiful here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And thank you for being part of this journey. Let's reach 10,000, side by side.